Hey dude, welcome back to my weekly updates, episode number 2. For those of you that are new here, this is my no thrills, no editing YouTube series where essentially I'm building my coaching company in the public eye. I'm showing exactly behind the scenes what it is that I'm doing week to week, the strategies that I'm implementing, my kind of rationale and thinking for making changes with content, with marketing, with sales, with all of that stuff. And this is the sort of thing that I find interesting as a small business owner, and so perhaps you find it interesting too. So without further ado, let's get stuck into this week's episode. There have been a few little changes behind the scenes with my lead generation strategy right now, and also my content marketing. So I'm going to dig into each of those in a bit more detail. But before I do, I wanted to actually showcase one of our client wins and explain how the client actually achieved this win. So I've censored his surname, but his name is Harry, and you can see here that he submitted one of his deal forms. So every time one of our clients signs up a new client, or they sign up several clients, they submit one of these forms, and then that all gets tracked on our client management database, so we can see how our clients are performing. And he submitted this deal form for 16,250K, 16.2K, I should say. And I want to explain how he's done this. So the thing that I want you to understand is that we are in a trust recession. So the way that we operate in our coaching businesses is we sell what's called a micro offer, and then we upsell into a core offer, and we throw coal on that fire with something called the supercharged story strategy. And what this basically is, it's a way of almost like, and I reluctantly use this terminology, but it's kind of a way of hacking the algorithm on Instagram. You massively increase your reach and engagement on one particular story by combining sticker taps, direct calls to actions, and periods of time where your stories go quiet. And all of those things combined mean that you get lots of reach and engagement on this one specific story, and then you sell a micro offer with that story. Harry did this, and it resulted in him getting, I think it was 32 micro offer sales, which were all done with a document, no sales calls needed. And then what he ended up doing is upselling, I think from memory, it was 11 upsells, with the vast majority of those upsells coming via the way of Loom videos. And I think he did like maybe 1 or 2 sales calls. So that's a pretty cool win. And that leads me on nicely to this next clip that I wanted to share with you from the school games of Alex Hormozy and Sam Ovens. They're basically really candidly talking about why it is that people are struggling with their direct response marketing right now, especially in info businesses. So if you're a coach, a consultant, an educator, a course creator, something along those lines, you will notice that trust is low. Okay. And that's the reason that this strategy that I just showed you works so phenomenally well, is because we are kind of working through the trust recession with long form content and micro offers that don't require a huge leap of faith from our customers. They don't have to hand over obscene amounts of cash on the front end. They can come into your business for a smaller price, experience it all firsthand, and then upsell into a core offer. So I wanted to just show you this clip very quickly, and hopefully this does a good job of explaining, or it does do a good job of explaining why we're doing what we're doing. So I'm just going to open this up real quick, and if I go view as, let me just open it here.
I agree. So I felt this 5 years ago. And so that's why I started making content. And so it started feeling like the writing on the wall, at least for me, and maybe some people are more sensitive to these things than others, but like it just, something felt off, that people could just like hop on and then just say, just promise all sorts of things, and then people would hand their life savings over to them. And that happens to enough people, and then bad reputations start happening in general. And first it starts, people, you have bad actors, but then with enough bad actors, the industry gets a bad reputation. And I think that fundamentally the education space in general, especially for charging, it itself has a bad brand. And so you start at -10 when you come in, because everyone just assumes that you suck. and that you have no credibility, and they are probably right 9 out of 10 times. And so it makes sense that you would have that reputation when you come in, because that's probably reality. And so you have to just like completely anchor on the other side, which is like, how do I be absolutely honest? How do I be absolutely upfront? How do I absolutely substantiate whatever I have? And I think that's the reason that, I mean, I've at least noticed this. A lot of people were late to it, but like creating content, making, building a brand, providing value ahead of time, that's like the direct response stuff works just under the context of I've already provided value to you. Because direct response, if you think about like what the term is, like direct response, you're asking them to do something. So it's just saying like, hey, soliciting people to do stuff doesn't work anymore. It's like, no, I mean, soliciting people to do stuff when you've never done anything for them doesn't work as well anymore. But if you do stuff for them first and then you directly solicit a response, it for sure works. It's just they're skipping the first step, the most important step. And so I think that's why, and I would say that between long form and short form, I see short form overall as just a way to get people into a longer form, dynamic. And we think about how do we have as many reinforcement cycles with a prospect in the short.
So that's the point I really want to pick up on here, a point that he just made. I really want to hammer down on this because it's such an integral part of the strategy that I'm using right now. And, this whole series of me sharing these weekly updates is to give you just a raw, authentic look behind the scenes of what I'm doing to acquire customers and clients, and also how I'm teaching my clients to do exactly the same thing. Alex just nailed it there, right? So the way that he sees short form is really just the vehicle to get people into long form. Now, he didn't explicitly say in that clip why and what his rationale was for that, but I can guarantee you that his thinking is that long form content is the vehicle to build trust. If you think about the topic of discussion that they were just covering there, it's this lack of trust. The guy who stands in front of the Lamborghini, is probably not even his Lamborghini, makes you empty your bank account with your life savings, and then because he's a bad player, doesn't deliver upon his promises, right? That's the state that the market has experienced over the last few years. Lots of bad players bringing the overall credibility of our industries into disrepute. And the reason that we use long form and that we place so much focus and attention on long form content is because it is the vehicle to build trust with your audience. And I just hammer this message so much because I really want you to believe me when I say that although long form content has a much higher barrier to entry for business owners, for creators, because it takes more effort. You have to know your shit. You cannot hide behind fancy edits and cuts. When you crack it, when you get it right, you will experience what we call frictionless sales, because it no longer becomes about getting someone on a sales call and trying to convince them that your product and your service or that your character is worth investing in, because your audience have already spent so much time consuming your content through long form that they trust you immediately, and it becomes more of a formality. At least that's what I have noticed in my own experience and what my clients have relayed back to me in their experience. And it feeds back to this win here with Harry, right? A big reason that he was able to sell 30 plus clients into a micro offer and then upsell into a high ticket offer is because he'd built trust with his audience through long form content. That, and it doesn't get any, there's no big secret, unfortunately. Now obviously there are nuances and there are details that go into each element of your content marketing that need to be considered. Like, how do you make long form content? How do you get validated packaging ideas? What sort of content should you make? What equipment should you use? All of these things are factors that are worth thinking about, but nothing is more important than the idea that you need your audience and your leads to be able to spend a lot of time consuming your stuff. So I really just wanted to hammer that home. And I'm glad I stumbled across that clip this morning, because I always dedicate a little bit of time to learn from people that I respect, Alex and Sam Movens being two of those guys massively. And it just really reinforces the strategy that I'm using right now. So super happy with that. So in other news, I have decided to add a new feature into my free school community. I have linked that, by the way, in the description below. So if you want to join the free school community, if you're a coach or a consultant, or you want to become a coach or a consultant, then please do join us. It'd be great to have you there. What I'm going to be doing is answering questions from people in there. And whether it's one person, two people, 100 people, I will endeavor to answer all of those questions. And we only had one question this week. It's absolutely cool with me. So I'm going to answer that right now. And before I do, again, I want to explain, because this series is really all about building trust with my audience, building connections with my audience, and giving something back, adding value, and building in public. So without further ado, let's get into this question. It's from Gareth Coxon, and he basically says, if you lost everything and were starting from nothing / standing start, what service would you offer the market? Now, to answer this question, I'm going to put a couple of assumptions in place. Assumptions that I already have a skill that people would pay for. So to give you just the easiest example, when I got into the coaching space, I was a personal trainer and I was also in shape, right? So I was a kind of the walking embodiment of what a lot of people wanted to achieve with their own physique and so on and so forth. So it kind of made sense that I went into that space. So I'm operating under this assumption that I already have a skill that people will pay for. Now, just very quickly on this, I want to labor on this a little bit. There are what I deem to be 4 main categories that people will pay significant amount of money to be coached in or to be consulted in. Number one is, in fact, let me change that color because it's not very clear. Let's go red again. Number one is health / vanity, right? People will pay you lots of money to look better naked, to have more confidence in their own skin, and to improve their health. The second thing is wealth. Okay, if you can help people make more money or save more money or invest into their futures, people will pay you for that. That's currently the space that I'm operating in right now. The third thing is relationships. Okay, so this could be marriage coaching, this could be dating advice, this could be divorce coaching, could be so many different areas, but relationships is a huge industry in the coaching and consulting space because people value it a lot, right? They value their relationships a lot, and so they pay a lot of money for this. And then the fourth and final thing is pain. So physical pain, either getting out of pain or preventing future pain in the future. No shit. So those are the 4 areas that really you want to place your focus when it comes to deciding what your offer should be or could be. Now, interestingly, there's one thing that encapsulates all of those things in their entirety, and it is status. Okay. Ideally, what people want from working with a coach or working with a consultant is increased status, right? So status is how other people perceive them, right? How the universe looks at them. People want to get in shape because they want respect from others, or they want to be attractive to the opposite sex or to the same sex, if that's your thing, right? People want wealth to command respect from others. So quite often, like if you ask, I use this as a bit of a filter for people when they're thinking about making a large purchasing decision. I'm like, okay, before you buy this thing, let's say it's like a fancy watch or something that costs $10,000. Before you buy it, would you still buy it if nobody could know that you have it? And it's a really nice filter to run through because it gets to the nuts and bolts of why you're purchasing the thing in the first place. Because if the answer is no, then you're doing it to impress other people and you're coming from the wrong place with that thing. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. I just don't think that's a compelling reason enough to spend a significant amount of money on something, okay? So I kind of digress there, but I wanted to share that insight. So what would I do if I lost everything or if I was starting from scratch? I would actually use the classic Hormozy framework. Hormozy seems to be the theme of the day for this week's weekly update. But what he basically did is he approached people in his contacts. So he approached all of his contacts and he said, look, I'm going to coach you for free over, I think it was 90 days or maybe 60 days. And he basically gave them everything they needed, to get a result. It was a fitness coaching offer, right? So it was helping people get in shape. And he said, all you need to do is donate any amount of money of your choice to a charity and prove it to me. Now, this was absolutely genius because when you don't have results, you don't have social proof, it is difficult to ask people for money, right? And it is difficult to approach your contact list and say, come and work with me and pay me a low rate or pay me next to nothing, because it just feels a little bit rough, right? Reaching out to friends, family members, colleagues, and asking them for money, right? But the problem is that if you do this for free, there is no skin in the game. People don't apply themselves to the coaching that you're providing them, and then they ultimately don't get a result. And then because they don't get a result, you don't get the social proof, and it just becomes a waste of everyone's time. And it also leaves a bad taste in their mouth, right? They now have a perception of you and your services and think that you can't get them a result. But actually, the problem wasn't the fact that you can't get them a result. It was the fact that they didn't have any skin in the game. They hadn't put their money where their mouth was. So there's a conundrum here. And what this approach does is it basically gets skin in the game by having people donate money to charity so that they actually listen to what you're telling them to do. When people pay, they pay attention without the awkwardness of asking people for money. So there is no awkwardness. And I just think this is absolutely genius. So really, when you're starting out with any coaching or consulting offer, the number one primary aim that you have to achieve is collecting proof, proving to yourself that you can do what you think you can do, and proving to the market that you can do what you say you do. So that is the number one primary aim when you're just getting started out. Once you've collected 5 to 10 amazing results and you've proven the concept, then you can start charging money. Now, you want to start by charging at the lower end of what the market charges, okay? Not below what the market charges, at the lower end. So let's keep this on the fitness niche. Let's say you do some market research of 10 competitors, and on average, the lowest that you found was $200 per month, okay? So you want to be charging in the region of $200 per month moving forwards. As you build more case studies and more social proof, and you start to gain traction and actually get inbound inquiries for your services, then you can start upping your prices and charging towards the upper end of what is typical in your market, okay? So it's really important that you do market research. It's really important that in the early stages, you focus purely on getting results, refining your skills, getting better as a coach, and actually delivering on the promises that you make. That is what I would suggest, dude. So hopefully that's been useful for you, Gareth, dude. And like I said at the beginning of this, I've just introduced this kind of feature into my free school community. So if you do want to get in there and ask questions for next week's weekly update video, please feel free. I would love to have you in there. You can pop your questions into the thread, and then I'll answer that question in as much detail as I can on next week's video. Anyway, I hope this has been useful, dude. Like I said, it's kind of no frills, not really fancy, but just an insight into how my week's been going and what it is that I'm doing behind the scenes. And I will see you on the next one. Just to let you know, this Friday, there is a slightly more polished video coming out. So keep an eye out on my channel for that one. Have an amazing week, and I will speak to you very soon. Peace and love, amigo.